Today is August the 27th, 2009, and I am John Pontius here at the Peabody Public Library with Mary Alice Pugh for the Whitley County Oral History Project. Thank you for coming, Mary Alice.
Sure.
Have you lived all your life in Whitley County?
Yes, except when I went to college and when my husband was in service, yes.
Okay. Where did you live? Where did you grow up?
302 South Line Street. Gladys Gamble lives there now.
Okay, so you've always lived in Columbia City.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in different houses.
Okay. Who were some of your ancestors here in Whitley County?
Well, my maiden name was Gates. My father's name was John Gates. He was the oldest son of Benton, Eli, and Alice Gates. His grandfather was a plasterer. He did fresco paintings in the old courthouses. And this is my father's grandfather. This would be my great-great-great-grandfather. His name was Thomas Gates. And he was a soldier in 1812. He was killed in the war. So you can go back that far on that side. My mother's name was Damaris Marguerite Scott. Her father was Dr. J.W.C. Scott of Etna. And her Stephen Austin was her father, and he was the first president of the Whitley County Medical Association.
And so he was a doctor too?
Yeah.
Okay.
As a wedding present, he gave my grandmother, whose name was Mary Jane, some land across from where he lived, and they built a brick house. And if you go out to Etna, you'll see two brick houses as you come in from the south.
Right, right.
And Grandfather Scott lived in the house there and had an office in the side yard. I don't remember the people's names that are in there right now, but they're refurbishing the house, and it's a slow project.
Okay. Your father was a lawyer, right?
He was admitted to the bar, but he never practiced.
What did he do?
He was an abstractor.
Okay. Now, was it his brother that was governor of Indiana?
Right. Yeah.
Ralph Gates. So, what did you do in high school? What kind of things were, what kind of activities?
I didn't study like I should have. Let's see. Well, I was on the debate team, and I majored in having a good time, I guess. I was in the band, but I really wanted to be in the vocal department. But at that time, we had Larry Johnson here, and he produced all these championship high school bands, and it was the thing to be in the band.
Okay.
And I can remember we were at the high school at 8 o'clock every morning, and we'd march down the alley. That's where the old Marshall School was. Out to the DeVoe athletic field, down those steps, and practice for an hour and a half before we go into school.
Okay. And like you played in football games or concerts?
Concerts, yeah.
Okay. And then you mentioned one time that you were a member of the Rainbow Girls, was it? Or
well, I think that was the name of it. I wasn't too sure. Madge Everhard was the instigator of it, and they met in, I think it's Overdare. I don't know whether Overdare Press is still in business or not, but it was in that building across from the courthouse up on the second or third floor, and I think we were the Rainbow Girls.
And what did you do? Did you have dances or something?
Yeah, we had some dances, and they asked groups over, the boys group from other towns over.
Okay.
We got together.
Okay.
It was just something, I think that was an offshot of the Odd Fellows. I mean, that was for the younger people.
Okay.
I could be wrong about that, but I think that's right.
Okay. And did you go to college?
Yes. I went to Stevens College in Columbia, Missouri. That was a junior college for 2 years, and then I transferred to the University of Illinois, where I graduated in 1944.
Okay. Now, what kind of, did you have a kind of a career, or were you working anywhere during your life?
Not really. The war was going on. and I think everybody about that time wanted to get married. I graduated in June, and about 2 weeks later I went to Camp Gordon, Georgia, and married my husband, Edwin Pugh, who I met in college.
Okay.
And then I didn't use my degree or do any teaching until my youngest son went off to Purdue University, and then I started working at the Peabody Library.
Oh, really? Who was the director at that time?
Phyllis Monago,
Okay.
very nice lady. And I can remember as a child going to the library. It was just a nice walk from South Line Street up to the library, and my friend Barbara Brindle and I would go up there, and we had a great time down there.
In the library?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yes.
what kind of things did you do in the library?
Mostly we read.
Okay.
They didn't have programs like they do now for the. They had a
Okay.
summer reading club, but I think that was about all.
Were you into reading novels or?
I read about anything I could get my hands on.
Oh.
Mrs. Faust was and Mamie Snipes worked in the library then.
They were directors
Yeah.
at one time, weren't they?
Mm-hmm. Somewhere, I couldn't figure out where I put things. I put them away. I've got them, but I don't know where. But I've got a list of a summer reading club and all the people that were in it.
Oh, okay.
And I do have my original Peabody Library card, which says I was number 1069.
Okay. Now, you would all read the same book and have a discussion? Is that what that was?
No, we just read books. I mean,
Okay, the club itself, what was that like? What was that for?
well, I don't believe per se. Oh, well, they could keep track of the number of books we read, and
Oh, I
and
see,
give us
I
a
see.
prize for the one who'd read the most books.
Okay. Was there any particular author that you remember that you particularly liked? Did you read any of
Yeah.
Lloyd Douglas's books?
Well, later I did, yeah.
Okay.
When I worked at the library, I read a lot. One of the ones that I remembered, Jean Auel, A-U-E-L, wrote a book, Clan of the Cave Bear. And I don't know why. She wrote some other books, but they were not up to that par. But
Okay.
that one book really stuck out in my mind. And I liked Louis L'Amour, and I liked romances.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I had trouble with my eyes, and I had to watch what I read.
Okay. Did you have other hobbies like cards or?
Oh, yes. I love to play cards.
What
and
kind? What game?
I still play a lot of bridge, just about anything except canasta. And
Okay.
my dad had a chance to try out with the Chicago Cubs, and my grandmother wouldn't let him because it meant he would be playing on Sunday. But as a result of that, both my sister and I were very avid Cub baseball fans. Well, I still am.
Oh, okay.
And every year we get to go up to Wrigley Field and watch them play. And we like to play golf. He took my sister fishing. I wasn't the fishing type.
Mhm.
And
So you had
basketball.
How many brothers and sisters?
I have one sister.
Okay.
She's Jane Lawson. She's deceased.
Yeah. Now there's been some major changes in the library in your life, haven't there?
Yes.
Where was when you were growing up? The library was there on Main Street, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, do you like? You still come to the library?
Oh, yeah,
probably,
yeah.
Okay. You have
It's
to
not
drive
quite-
now.
It's not quite so convenient, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of services out here and do a lot of good things.
Good. And are you? Do you volunteer at the library?
Well, I was one of the original members of the Friend of the Library.
Okay.
Pat Reed and Doris Stevenson and I volunteered to select the officers because none of us wanted to be an officer at the beginning.
Okay.
And I never did that capacity. And I did come to the meetings until you changed to daytime. When you met on Monday nights, I believe it was.
Yes.
I always came.
Okay.
Well, I belong to a bridge group. We've gotten together for well over 20 years.
Okay.
And I'm sorry that was my priority.
Can you tell us some of the people in your bridge group?
June Eberhard Brock.
Okay.
Anadine Schrader. Anadine Mosier Schrader. Jean Langar. These are the ones now. When we first started out, there was a lot of school teachers, and they've moved on. And we used to think, when we had our children and they were small, we couldn't possibly get home till midnight.
Okay.
And that's for the past now.
So you still meet regularly?
Yep.
And at other people's homes?
Yeah. Yesterday they met at my house.
Okay.
We usually go out and eat first and then play cards.
Okay. Okay.
In the wintertime there's 4 of us. In the summertime there's 8 of us. But there's 2 of them that go to Florida. Well, one of them, Lucille Staples, she never came back here this year. She's in Ocala, Florida.
Okay.
And Mrs. Langar and Mrs. Hibbs, one goes to Florida, one goes to Arizona in the winter.
What did you do back in your younger years for entertainment? What did your family do? There were.
Well, when I was growing up, my dad was an ardent fisherman.
Okay,
and when he came home, he would usually take a nap and get cleaned up, and we'd go to Fort Wayne to the vaudeville show at the, it wasn't the embassy, I think it was the Palace. It's across the street.
Vaudeville show, because there was nothing else much, no TV.
And then, of course, there was a theater here in town, and we moved from South Line Street up to Chauncey Street.
Okay.
And our next door neighbor was Art Hazel Hancock, and he ran the theater.
The movie did.
Yeah. And he did tell me something interesting that I have never heard, and I didn't believe it until much later. He said he had his choice of whether he could get the happy ending or the sad ending to a movie. And he said he usually took the happy ending. Well,
okay.
I didn't think anything about that, but maybe 2 or 3 months later, I was someplace and I saw this same movie and it had a different ending.
Really?
I haven't been able to pin that down any more than that.
Were you caught up in any particular movie stars back then?
This is really going to date me. I like Janet Gaynor and Lou Ayres. Now they were in, I think, one of the original versions of State Fair. Now that's been a long, long time ago.
Okay. And how much did it cost, you suppose, back then?
That I can't tell you. We got to go to the movie. I did about every Saturday afternoon or Saturday afternoon.
Okay. And who would you go with usually?
Well, I'd go by myself. Sometimes I'd go with Barbara, Brindle, and
okay.
But usually I went by myself.
Okay.
It was safe then.
Yeah.
Cut that out.
Did you play in sports in any way when you were young or in high school?
Well, I always liked basketball. I still do. I'm an IU fan. I wasn't very good.
Okay.
But I'm a good rooter.
Okay, good. So, when you were growing up, was there any particular thing that happened in town that really, it's a very vivid memory that for you?
I can remember 2 things. One was Admiral Byrd had this huge machine. Well, by standards now it's not huge, but it was a piece of equipment of some kind that he took to either the South or the North Pole. And it had a breakdown here in Columbia City. And it was in that block where the Carousel Beauty Parlor is on Van Buren. Anyway, it went kaput. And they had to send to Chicago for parts. And their initial comment, well, they'll get the part back the next day, but it was 3 or 4 days before they got the part back. And people would come into Columbia City to see that vehicle. Eventually they did get it back on the road, and he took it with him on his experiences in the polls. And another thing I remember, and I think this was in the early 30s, they had a big pageant out at DeVoe Field. And the whole town took part in it. And they had dances from various countries. I can remember being in several, but the one I remember the most was the Irish jig. And they had a queen contest along with it. And Marilyn McNagny won it.
Okay.
But unfortunately, the man that promoted the contest skipped out. So she never got, I don't know whether it was money involved or not, but she never got what she was entitled to.
Okay.
But it was, we worked hard on that pageant. It ran 2 or 3 nights, I think maybe a whole weekend. And it was good.
About when was that, roughly?
I'm going to say about 30, 31.
Okay.
Because I think it was a Century of Progress, but I don't think it had anything to do with the World's Fair in Chicago.
Okay. Now, you know, back about that time was the Depression.
Yeah.
Now, did that affect your family life at all?
Well, yeah.
Did
Dad was the bank president. And it's sort of funny, I was naive and didn't think about it, but I wondered, after I got to thinking about it years later, some of the people have been my good friend. Just get away, you know, shoot.
Why?
Well, because the bank went under. And my dad went around and personally talked to everyone that was in that bank. The bank was shut just 1 day. Now, you couldn't do that now.
And then it opened again.
Opened again, yeah.
What was the name of that bank?
Farmers Loan Trust.
Okay. So it was, and from then on the bank was fine.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay.
Everybody had to pull in their belts, but yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And did you see any other effects on other people of the Depression? There were people that were having a really hard time?
Well, we lived on South Line Street, and there was a telephone pole, and it was marked, and that was about 3 blocks from the railroad track.
Yeah.
And at least 3 times a week we'd have hobos.
Okay.
I remember one of them saying to my mother, if you got something to eat, and she said, well, all I've got's a cold apple dumpling. And he said, man, that wouldn't be very palatable. He turned around and left.
Okay.
Yeah. And somebody else that I'd like to mention, Joe Wilson was the man that did our yard work. Mm-hmm. And he had worked with the horses down at Culver Military Academy. He lived on Wallace Avenue, but he had a bicycle, and on the back he had a cart that carried his lawnmower and other essentials, a big cart. And that's how he pedaled around town.
Oh.
And
he did that quite a while?
Yes, quite a while. Years, 3 or 4 years. I remember one of the delights I had. He let me ride around the yard in that bicycle, and he laughed. He was a big man, and I'm very kind. I imagine he was good at what he did. And he was. Made me think of Rosebud Slim, but I knew Joe better, yeah.
Were there some other characters around town that were memorable, or politicians?
I'm just trying to think here. Well, we lived on South Line Street. Mrs. Florence Heller, her husband was Frank Heller, and he was a lawyer here. Okay, I have no recollection of him, but she was our neighbor, a very strong Presbyterian, and her husband was a diabetic, great big man. Mm-hmm. And I can remember my mother saying that she'd see him at night out in the kitchen frying potatoes, because when he gets hungry, that's sort of material.
Okay.
Then some of the people that I remember were Mrs. List. She worked at the library for a while.
Was she the director?
I think she was.
Okay.
She came to our church, but her husband was a retired college professor.
Okay.
And I think to please her, more than anything else, he would teach Sunday school. and she was active in the church. And my oldest son was in his Sunday school class, and he said to the kids one time, he said, "You know, I'm here really to please my wife because I'm an atheist."
Okay.
But he said he was a real good, a real intelligent man. He liked him a lot. Let's see here. Oh, well, there was a lot of Presbyterian ministers that I remember. The one that impressed me the most was Reverend Chalfont. He probably was the best minister we ever had.
And about what time was that? What year roughly?
Probably in the 30s.
Okay.
He left here and went to Peru, and he ended up in South Bend.
What about him impressed you?
Well, he was just a nice man, and he was not. Before that, it seemed to me we'd always had old men.
Okay.
And he had this one son who I would imagine was about your age. I don't know, Hugh Paul.
Okay.
But he was just a nice, kind man, and you knew that he was
Okay.
going farther than Columbia City.
Okay. You were a Presbyterian then all of your life. Did you grow up as a Presbyterian?
I can tell you a story about that.
Okay.
When my dad and mom got married, there was quite a bit of consternation between the two families because the Scotts were all Democrat Presbyterians.
Okay.
And my grandmother Gates's father had been a Methodist minister, and they were Republicans. So, to solve their problems, they became Republican Presbyterians. Took a little bit of both.
Okay.
I didn't. My aunt told me that. I wasn't aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
But Dad and Mom have a happy life together.
And some of the other ministers that you can remember?
Well, let's see here. I've got them all down here. Oh, yeah. Reverend Malcolm. He's the one that was influential in starting the plaque of the servicemen.
Okay, which is now in the library
Yes,
here?
I think it is. Reverend Crosby, Reverend Wolf, Reverend Garner, Reverend Schmokel, and that's when we had our problems in the church split.
Would you care to talk about that? But we can say that there was a split, and the minister took most of the people from the church to another church.
Yeah, they have the new church out on Old 30.
Okay, and you didn't go with them?
No,
then? Okay.
no, I didn't.
Now, how come you didn't go with them?
Well, I was satisfied with where it was.
Okay.
I can't. You're going to have to talk to somebody more experienced in what was going on. I remember there was a trial, and it it was in the local papers, and they made the front page all over the country.
Oh, okay.
But what we didn't know was that Schmokel had come from a church up around the Gary area that had gone through this before.
Okay.
And Reverend Schmokel is still around in this vicinity.
Okay.
And I don't want to, occasionally
Okay.
I'll see him.
Okay, can you tell me then what happened after that? You had probably very few people for a while, right?
Yes, because we had to sue to get possession of the church. That's what the suit was about.
Oh, okay.
And we met in homes, and we met in Citizens Bank, various places till we got the church back.
Okay.
I was just trying to think about the only one that I can think of offhand right now that went to the other church and that are still there is
Okay.
Ines Waugh.
Okay.
And there were a lot of people that went there, but then they eventually went somebody else, like Helma Crum, and he
Okay.
goes to another church. I can't tell you what it is.
Okay.
But a lot of the people that were Presbyterians go to the Methodist Church or various other churches now.
Okay. And then just recently, the church decided that it was no longer feasible to continue.
Mm-hmm.
So where are the people going to church from since then?
There was only about either 12 or 14 when we quit, I think.
Okay.
The ones that I've talked to haven't gone anyplace, I'll be honest with you. They're
Okay.
still sort of...
Okay. Well, did you consider this a really kind of a tragedy?
Yes.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, it's one of the saddest days of my life.
Okay.
And I haven't gone anyplace since May the 31st.
Okay. Okay. Okay, now, there's been, I assume you always paid attention, read the newspapers, and there have been a lot of changes, you know, in your lifetime. What newspaper did your family read when you were growing up? Do you remember?
No, we took the Columbia City paper, and
Columbia City?
I think we took the News Sentinel.
Okay. But how about the local paper?
Well, there was only one. Well,
Okay.
yeah, I know what you mean. Post and mail, commercial mail. I never was quite too sure what was going on down there because it was the same place, just the editorial was about different. That's about all it was.
Okay. Well, like one was Republican and one was Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
Did your family get involved in politics ever, or did you? Was it important to them?
Well, I'm a registered Republican, I always have been.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean I couldn't vote for a good Democrat friend.
Okay. Okay. You have, you know, thinking back in your life, you have some other memories that really stand out about your life or Columbia City?
Well, it's sort of funny. I can remember we lived on South Line Street until 1935 when we moved up on Chauncey Street.
Okay.
But I can remember a lot of good memories down there because, well, one thing I think about is Old Settlers Day. There was always people coming in wanting to knocked on the door, wanted to have picnics in the yard, which was fine.
Okay.
And then we went down to the churches always had their food stands downtown.
Oh.
Ours was next to where the old theater building used to be. And it was sort of a game to see which church would make the most money. They published in the paper, yeah. And then
they would sell like pies.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Hancock would have a free matinee every Thursday morning for the kids.
Okay.
And of course, I remember the Tilda World very well. Spent a lot of my pennies on that. Then another thing I remember is we did not have a garage, and Dad would park his car, leave it overnight at Thompson's garage there, where I think Redmond's Plumbing is, and we'd go over to Fisher's filling station. And Arizona Fisher would hand pack ice cream, and we'd go home and have a feast on that ice cream.
Okay.
I remember that. And this is sort of funny. One time I sat down just for the heck of it and went all around the block that we lived in, and I could remember everybody living in that block and just about what they did. And the man 2 doors down on South Line was named Homer Crawford, and he had this Model T. He didn't drive it, but he had it up on, what do you call it? A stand in his garage. And I used to go down there and look at that thing. I never saw him drive it, but it was a masterpiece, and he kept it in sprint condition.
Now, back then, did they have special entertainment at Old Settlers?
Oh yes, they had this big. It wasn't a gazebo; it was a bandstand up there.
By the courthouse?
Yes.
Courthouse Square.
And Edgar and Milton Lorber, who ran Lorber's store, were sort of the MCs, and they'd have real good acts in there.
Okay,
and
like singing or...
Singing and dancing and clowns, and they had some acrobats.
Okay.
And it was just, people really liked to come.
Did they have cotton candy and things like that?
Cotton candy and taffy and... I can't think what you call those things.
Like corn dogs?
Yes, but the big thing is floppy things.
Oh, the elephant ears?
Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes,
okay.
yes. Let me think, I'm just trying to think what else I've missed. And I can remember some of the other things I remember, some of the ladies that came to church, I always had hats and gloves on.
Yeah.
Nellie Raber, she was related, her husband was related to Frank Raber. And Beverly Saray.
And Nellie was a county historian, wasn't she, at one time?
I think she was, yeah.
Yes.
She came back here from, I don't know where they lived, but they came back here.
From Ohio somewhere, I think.
Mm-hmm. And Mary Frances Raber's mother, Sarah.
Now, was she a teacher?
Mary Frances, oh yeah.
Okay. Is
She
she the
didn't
one?
teach here though, she taught in Jeffersonville.
Now, the school is Mary Raber School.
But that was her aunt.
Oh, okay.
Mary Frances Raber was Frank Raber's sister.
Okay.
But then Mary Raber, I better forget about the Frances. Mary Raber School down here.
Yes.
She was the primary teacher here for years and years. I never
Okay.
met her. But this
Okay.
Mary Frances Raber would be her niece. She was the one that taught in
Okay.
Jeffersonville, and when she came back here, she was a member of the church. Her mother, Sarah, they called her Sick, was the first Sunday school teacher I remember. And she had a high, piercing voice. I can hear her yet singing, "Yes, Jesus loves me."
Okay.
And the church was never that large, but the Sunday school kids would sit in the first 2 rows there and sing that song, and then we'd go back behind and have our lessons.
Did you have any teachers in any of your high school or grade school that really were memorable?
Yes. One of them was, my first grade teacher was Margaret Coyle Aker. And I remember her primarily because she was an animal lover, and she had what they called a pet parade out at Shinneman's Grove, which is there by the 4-H ground.
Okay.
Everybody, that one Friday afternoon, we'd all bring our pets to school and march out there and parade around and have a good time with that.
Okay.
And then another teacher I remember was Fern Hammer.
Okay. Why do you remember her?
Well, I like geography, and she made it good.
Oh, okay.
And then another one was Lois Heller, and she was the daughter of this Mrs. Heller that lived next door to us. And she was a literature teacher. Anybody that ever had her would never forget the Highwayman, because she would recite it with vigor, I'll tell you. And then Bertha Thornburg.
And who is she?
She was a high school debate teacher, Latin teacher. I had her for 4 years, and you did your druthers with her. You didn't pull anything over her.
No nonsense?
Yes.
Okay.
I was on the debate team, and I know several times, 2 or 3 times a week after school, we'd go in there and prepare us.
Okay.
And
were you successful in your debate team?
Not too good. Let's see. My junior year was George Thompson and Jim Biddle, and then Paul Raleigh and I. And we fared much better than we did the next year. It was Miss Thornburg split Paul and I up, which shouldn't have happened. And the other 2 debaters were Saul Phlox and Bill Davis.
Columbia City High School has kind of a long history of debate championships.
She's the one that was the forerunner.
Okay.
Started it. Yes, she was very good.
Okay.
And another teacher that I remember, we had 2 great music teachers, Hazel Pittman Munns. She was the vocal teacher, and Lawrence Johnson, who was a local guy, came back and built our bands up into national prominence.
Oh.
And they built that, it's gone now, the band building. It was to the northwest side of the high school building. of the grade school building. They built this little building there. It was like a prefab, 2 big sections.
Just for the band?
The one was for the band and the other is for the vocal.
Oh, okay.
And if those 2 teachers could have gotten along, they had some problems. We could have put on some wonderful musical shows here.
Okay,
but it just didn't work out that way. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm saying things I shouldn't. No, okay. Then, let's see, I'm just trying to think.
Now, when you were growing up, did you go downtown and walk around and go to the drugstores and get something like a soda or something?
Yeah, the Columbia Drugstore. That was
on Van
that's where we got.
Buren?
Yeah, that's where we got our school books. Paul Pinkley and George Lane.
School books too there.
Yeah, all the school books were bought right there.
Oh.
Yes, and you go in there and get Cokes. And then when I was in high school, we hung out at Mullendorf's Confectionery. That's where David Hare has his law office now.
Okay, on Main Street?
No, Van Buren.
Van Buren Street,
yeah.
okay.
And then there was a Klondike down farther on Van Buren Street. That somewhere, particularly the kids from the country would go down there and hang out.
So what kind of things would you get there to drink or eat?
Oh, Coke, phosphates, yeah.
Okay.
I worked at Walgreen Drugstore, Joe Burnworth, and that was...
Did you say you worked?
Yes, 2 or 3 summers I worked there.
What did you do?
So I was a soda jerk,
okay.
and anything else that needed to be done.
Okay.
But marshmallow float, banana splits, one thing I didn't like to make.
Okay.
I remember one night, it was late and this man came in and he wanted a sandwich. Well, I went down him and got him a sandwich, and after he left, I went over there and there was this wallet on it.
Mm-hmm.
Chair, and I gave it to Mr. Burnworth. Well, within 2 minutes, this man came back. Wanted to know if we'd found something, and Mr. Burnworth gave it to him, and I can see that man yet counting all that money.
Okay.
And he said, "It's all here."
Okay. Okay, now, do you remember any doctors back when you were during your life that were memorable?
Dr. Knoll was our doctor. But if it hadn't been for my grandfather, I probably wouldn't have been alive because I wasn't expected to live. But after he died...
now, was that when you were a baby?
Yeah,
or?
Dr. Scott, yeah.
Okay.
He died when I was about 6 or 7. That's the first funeral that I can remember was out at Etna.
Okay.
And then, well, Dr. Harrer, of course, we're related. He was my doctor for a long, long time.
How were you related to Dr. Harrer?
Dr. Harrer's mother was Bess Austin, and she was a first cousin of my grandmother.
Okay. Okay.
I think I've got that right. There was quite an age gap in there between families. You know how
Yeah.
it used to be if somebody died, somebody else would marry a widow, and then you'd get mixed up.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then I went, I think Dr. Harrer was my doctor for many, many years till he retired and went to Florida. And Dr. Brooks, and he retired.
Okay. So, you were, you had 2 children? Or
I have 4.
4 children, okay.
My oldest son and my second son are both abstractors. One lives in Fort Wayne, one lives here.
So they have one of your sons has the same business that your husband had.
Gates Land Title, yes.
Carrying on with the business.
Mm-hmm. And
Okay.
My daughter works for Indiana University in Bloomington, and my youngest son retired from the Air Force after 20-some years. He lives in San Antonio. Somebody else that I would like to mention is Shinzo Oki.
Okay, who is he?
Well, he was a Japanese man. As I understood it, when some of these local people went over to that area to seek gold, Gordon Chapman was one of them. And they met this fella. He was a young man, and brought him back here to the States, and he graduated from high school here. And then he went back and married his promised lady and came back here. They had one daughter named Grace. But Mr. Oakey was very active in our church. He would make chop suey suppers for anything that needed money for high school that Grace was in. He was just a marvelous man. And he did paintings. I don't think that's one. No, that isn't it. I have a painting in my house. When he died, his daughter Grace gave all these paintings to the Rotary Club. Shinzo was a member, and they auctioned them off.
He would paint scenes around Columbia City, maybe?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know exactly where they were, but the one I have is a country scene, no.
Okay.
But
what did he do for a living here?
Oriental Shoyu Factory.
Oriental Shoyu Factory, and what?
They made chop suey.
Okay.
It's down there on, I can't say, right after you cross the Pennsylvania Railroad track on South Line Street.
Okay.
And turn back west. He was a factory in there, yeah. And it was good stuff. When he sold out, I think he sold his out to that Beatrice Food Corporation in Ohio.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And it's no longer operating now.
Mm-hmm. The daughter lives in California.
Okay.
Nobody's heard from her in years.
Okay. I seem to remember a story about him bringing cherry trees to Columbia City at one time.
Ginkgo trees.
Ginkgo trees, okay.
I think that's what I heard. I'm not.
Okay.
I think you're right.
Now,
I don't know about
there
that.
is a ginkgo tree in the city park there in that ravine. Maybe that was one of them.
He had one in front of his house. That's where Dr. Chamberlain's office is now.
On Main Street?
Yes, and they cut them down.
Oh, okay.
And I'm sure you've heard other people talk about how they managed to keep Mr. Oakey out of a concentration camp because the people here in town all signed signatures to keep him in town.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Great.
he was a very nice gentleman.
Okay.
Let's see, got anything else there? I can, some of the people in the church that I can remember, I'm sort of rambling here.
That's fine.
Beulah Wilson, whose husband was Wilford, he was a teacher here in the high school, was our church organist for years and years. And then after she died, Wilma Murphy, that's Murphy Jewelers, Harold's wife, she played the organ for our church for many years. Then there was people that I remember like Florence Brockenhammer and her daughter Pat. They had such beautiful voices. One thing I remember, I like to sing, and I sing in our church choir. And at that point started out Sarah Lucanville, who was the daughter of my mother's stepbrother, but she always considered him a brother. She directed the church choir. And at that time there was Sarah, the Hudson boys, Tom and Jim, and Margaret and Bloom and Ruth Ann Fry and myself. There were 6 of us in the church choir. And it was the thing then. I can remember we went up to Chicago to something in a soldier's field, and the church choir sang.
Okay. Is in your life who would you think, who would you consider as perhaps the most admirable person around town, or a couple of them, people you really admired,
Well,
men or women?
I think my mother.
Your mother.
Yeah.
Okay. Why? What was it about her that you admire?
Well, she was always there when I needed her, and she was there for my dad. And
Okay.
I'm just trying to think. There was a lot of people. I suppose Bertha Thornburg would be about the closest that I admired.
Okay.
I thought I had this well thought out, but I can't remember. I remember little bits and pieces of things.
Did you like Governor Gates? Did you think he was a person that you could admire? He was a politician.
Yeah, he was a politician. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did he do a lot for Columbia City?
Probably as much as anybody else.
Okay. Can
Maybe
you think
Jim
of
Adams.
anyone else that did a lot for
Well,
Columbia
probably
City?
Jim Adams.
Jim Adams.
Yeah.
Now, what was he?
He was head of the, I think he was head of the highway department. He got a political job. He and Uncle Ralph were on opposite sides of the fence, but they were both friends, I think.
Okay. What in Columbia City? What did he do? What was he doing in Columbia City?
Ran the newspaper.
Ran the newspaper.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else he did in Columbia City?
Well, he ran the other bank.
President of the bank?
Yeah. Providence Loan, I don't know.
Okay.
I'll tell you something else that I can remember. My dad, because of his work, he was in and out of the courthouse. And he was coming out of the courthouse one day, and he heard all this noise and shooting, and he got behind the cannon. That's the day they robbed the bank.
Was this the time back in about 1929 when the bank was
Right
robbed?
in there. Yep.
Okay.
And he said he was just lucky he got behind that cannon, but he saw that man being shot.
Now, was that the time when someone was killed?
Yes. This man was shot. He saw him shot.
Oh. And did they catch these?
I think they did. You'll have to.
Okay. So we had a bank robbery in town in 1929, and someone was shot and killed.
Yeah. I'm thinking maybe it might have been before that. I don't know. Yes.
Okay. And it was on Van Buren Street there.
Yes, it was there about where. Well, let's see, there on the corner. Everything has changed. Mike Williams and Roy Barnes had a grocery and meat market there across from, well, on the other side of the streets where McNagny and the law offices are.
Mm-hmm.
There was a meat market, and then there was a bank in there, around in either the next door or the next one.
Okay.
I was just trying, Alan Rush had a style shop in there. I think it was next to that. Yeah.
Okay. Now, did the bank didn't close or anything? I mean, they just went ahead.
I don't think so. That I'm not sure of, but I remember him coming home and saying to Mom, I had a close shave.
Okay. All right.
And I can remember going down Van Buren Street, and there was Janss's Grocery on one side. On the other side of the street was Schreiner's Grocery and Weinkoop's Grocery. That's where the government building is now. And then on down in the next block was Leininger's Grocery and an A&P store. That was 5 groceries right on the main drag.
Why did they need 5 groceries?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
And they had these wire baskets out in front. I remember Janss's did especially, where they'd have the fresh produce. And this friend of mine and I would go to the library, and we'd come around the corner, and Barbara would pick up an orange or an apple. And maybe I did once or twice, I don't know. But we didn't do our grocery shopping there. But Mr. Myers called my dad, and Mr. Janss had called him. And we didn't get away with anything.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
Well,
and something else. Was the dance hall at Tri-Lakes.
Oh, like the 30s and 40s, perhaps?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. They had big bands out there, and about, once a month I'd get to go out there and dance.
Now, how would you go with someone? Or?
Yes, because my father wouldn't let us drive or even ride bicycles. So I was thinking about that the other day. I don't know how I got out there, but I did.
Okay.
And
now, who were there? The dance bands, were some of them well known?
Yeah. I don't know that Glenn Miller was there. He might have been. Tommy, one of the Dorseys was out there, and there was a big parking area beside it, and it was jam-packed full.
Now, the dance hall would have been at Tri-Lakes, maybe close to Shriner Lake?
Yes, you know where the road turns and goes on around Shriner Lake?
Yes.
Well, if you go straight,
By
it's
a restaurant there.
yeah, it was on beyond that, just a little ways, and it was a big structure, and there was plenty of parking back in there. And
Okay.
across the road was the Logan Staples grocery store.
Okay. How long when did that stop? After the war, maybe?
I think so.
Okay.
Helen O'Donnell, I think that was her name. She was a singer with one of the jazz bands, and she was there one night. And somebody met her somewhere and asked her if she remembered coming out here, and she said yes.
Okay.
But I should be able to tell you some of the big names, but I can't. I'm sorry.
Famous people coming to Whitley County, that's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, did you meet young men out there at the time and dance with them?
Once in a while, yeah.
Okay.
There was a group of fellows from Huntington would come up there and dance.
Okay.
Yeah, that's some of them. And then later on, Omer Stafford
Okay.
took that over, and he had a little band there. And then after he left, I think it just went to pieces, yeah.
I suppose TV and other things, radio and other things came along.
Could be, could be.
Yes.
I don't know exactly what Omer did, but he was a local man. His wife worked up at the law office. That's how I knew
Okay.
him.
Well, their son was in my class in high school.
Yeah,
yes.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, is there anything else you can think of you'd like to talk about?
Not really. I've had a good life, and I never thought I'd go overseas till my son was stationed in Remstein. We went overseas.
Germany?
Yep.
Okay.
And I was over there twice, and after my husband died, I became a connoisseur of trips.
Okay. Well, we really appreciate your coming and telling us your stories. Thank you very much.
Thank you.